Today's comics market is ripe with new titles by creators who are determined to get their books into your hands. My name is Onrie Kompan. For the last decade, I've been making and selling my own creator-owned comics and dealing as a collector in live sales. My signature series, Yi Sun Shin, is the book that cannot be defeated in battle and has over 250,000 copies in print. Now I'm taking comics to the next level and laying the groundwork for my fellow creators to get their voices heard so they can connect directly with you. This is your chance to engage live with top comic book talent and get your comics signed without having to wait in long lines or pay any fees. But remember, we only have a limited amount of their books in stock, so always remember to call it as you see it. You're watching Virtual Signings with Onrie, the live event show. What is up, everybody? Good afternoon. Mike James Bankston in the house already. You're watching Virtual Signings with Onrie, the live event show. I'm your host, Onrie Kompan, and I'm also the guy who, in the intro of Virtual Signings with Onrie, included Ted Sikora, who stiffed me on my dinner bill, but made up for it by helping me purchase the Vampirella art book that I'm not showcasing right now because it's way too big. And he's a really good friend of mine, and he still owes me dinner. I don't think we're squared up yet. But that's not why we're here right now. We're not here to pick on Ted, even though we all want to. Everybody wants to pick on Ted. We are here to discuss a comic book creator who is putting out one of the best-looking creator-owned books that is out on the market today. I kid you not. And he is just a delightful gentleman. I had him on Live with Onrie a while ago. And he's just got an awesome book. I just opened up the package right now. There he is, Mr. Stephen Prince. Welcome to Virtual Signings with Onrie. How you doing, brother? Tell us about this.
You're so low energy.
What's up?
You're
low
so
energy?
low energy.
Well, that's because I didn't have my coffee enema today. I'm really sorry. Every day is a good day when you're alive and looking at it. And where does my energy come from, Mr. Prince? It comes from this right here.
That's right.
Tell us all about this bad boy.
It will pump you up. It is a delightfully demented kaiju throwdown about a matador who fights monsters to make a better world for his daughter. It is inspired by things like Mad Max, Godzilla, and telenovelas. It's wild, it's crazy. If you love 80s action movies, you will love this book. If you love monster movies, you will love this book. The art, as you can see, it's amazing. It's by Fabio Alves, who was nominated for a Ringo Award last year for a book called Banjax. And the colors are by Alex Zieff, who is she just got picked up by Source Point Press to color Cult of Dracula.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that is a beautiful looking book, by the way.
Yeah. So these are professional, these are professional artists. We may be a small indie book, but we do it right.
Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. All right. Small indie doesn't mean nothing. And we have conversations about this all the time. For example, a couple months ago, I was actually with my producer, Kyle Northrup, in his hometown. And we were having a conversation about where the power is really held in this industry. And, everybody used to think it was Diamond, right? The distributor. And the reason why we were having this conversation was because on that day, the news broke out that Marvel was now moving to Simon & Schuster for their distribution. So now DC and Marvel are leaving Diamond. But people think, okay, well, now what's going to happen? How is this going to change the industry? What's going to happen and all this stuff? Not much is going to change. Comics are still going to get distributed because the power doesn't lie in the distribution channel. The power lies in the creators like yourself, right. Steven. Even the people that are doing comics and are like rocking it at Marvel and DC, you know where they go for their inspiration? They come to creator-owned comics because this is where you get to experiment with your craft. You're taking on all the risk. You have much less resources, and you're putting all of your creativity into it because you got everything tied up in it. And I've read your book. Yeah. I've read your book multiple times. This is some fantastic stuff, guys. And we got, let's see, how many sets do we have here? We got
Like I sent you
Five,
five.
I think five. By the way, your issue 2 cover, this is so sensational.
Yeah.
The light here is screwing things up for you folks, but this is the most dynamic cover. And actually, when I first came across this was when you did your Kickstarter campaign, and I saw a lot of Yi Sun-shin and Monster Matador, like the main character, and even the his comrade here. It's just, you've done such a good job of identifying the characters so that when we're reading the book, we know what's going on. And what's really cool about it is like there's only a few matadors. Everybody else is like, a resistance fighter and, fighting these big, disgusting kaiju that are like shaped like big flies and are like gross to look at. Here they are, for you guys. And it's some freaky stuff. So how, why, where did you come up with this idea?
I've always been attracted to the Matador. I always thought it was kind of like a cool, just like the whole, the dance, the drama, and you talked about Yi Sun-shin, the similarities, and in a way they're real life superheroes in a way. I mean, the way a matador fights a bull, I mean, the movement and stuff like that, it reminds you of like a Jack Kirby comic or something, the fluidity of movement. And the name just popped into my head. I was kind of doing an exercise of, let me create something, a character or something. And the name just popped into my head, Monster Matador, and it just kind of wrote itself. I mean, you say the name and you kind of figure out what the book is about right away. And Matador in Spanish is to kill, is a killer. So it's basically monster killer. And, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to see him go up against these giant kaiju monsters, just the visual of these giant monsters, these giant feet and fangs and whatnot. And then this 6 foot tall guy with a cape and a sword. And he's got it's not only about the fighting, but it's also about how, the ingenuity of how he figures out to actually defeat them, so yeah.
Well, go ahead. No, you were finishing your thought.
I was going to say, I'm talking about, I have a panel I'm recording tomorrow about Predator, about Batman versus Predator. And I love Predator. It's one of my favorite movies. And one of the things I love about Predator is you've got these macho guys, they're this team of macho guys. They've got their guns and they're blowing everything away. And then they come up against something and their guns don't do anything. And, at the end of the movie, Schwarzenegger, for all his muscle, for everything, he can't go up against this thing toe to toe. He's got to use his brains. He's got to use his ingenuity to defeat it. You know what I mean? So he builds the traps. He does all these things. So that's what the Matador is like. Yeah, he's a great fighter. He'll come up, but he knows that, on top of that, he's also got to use his brain. He's also got to figure out a way to actually trap this thing and fight this thing and kill this thing. So that's part of the fun is seeing how he's actually going to do that. When you're dealing with in Tango, the Matadors, it's a giant kind of Mothra-sized fly we call the Volagante, and she has tens of thousands of children that fly around with her and attack with her. So it's almost like they're fighting an army of monsters. And how do you do that? So part of the fun is watching him figure that out. So it's not just about the fighting, which there's a lot of fighting in it, but it's also about using his brains and his skills in that way. So it's like Batman or whatever. So, well,
you had mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger using his brain. And as soon as you said that, I was thinking, I was just thinking to myself, like, what was he thinking when he was like, realized he had to like fight the Predator? He was probably like, ow, 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 ow. And then he had to remember the most important thing of all, the one line he couldn't mess up ever: "Get through the chopper." That's using your brain there, But it's interesting you mentioned Batman versus Predator because I sold those. I had a set of those that I sold to my buddy, and I really sold them on Andy Kubert's artwork. Was it Andy or Adam? One of the two brothers.
They both did it. I think one of them inked it and one of them penciled.
Oh, okay, right on. Yeah, well, either way, they're both sensational. They're two of my favorite artists in the business, and that's an exciting premise. The monster and the indomitable human warrior who goes up against them. And what I really love is that you've isolated this series into a 3-issue series.
Right.
What this does, I think, is two things for you. A, it allows you to move through some mad volume because people know that in one shot they get the whole story, it's done, and they move on. You choose to come back to the character, you can do it at any point because you got a limited series.
Right.
I think that's what made Venom comics so popular because we now have a lot of those contained arcs like Venom the Mace and the Madness and Carnage Unleashed. Those books, it's like you just get all 4 single issues, and everybody loves reading single issues more than graphic novels, except for David Moore and Chuck Pino, Joseph Hardy, and Mike James Bankston. They don't like reading anything but trades. No, I'm just kidding.
Our next one we're doing I'm switching to, it's going to be a 64-page one-shot. Because one of the things I'm finding is that people, especially now, it's people want to get the whole story. They want to get the one shot. And I think when you get into like if you're doing issue 10, 11, it's intimidating for a reader.
How are you gonna keep people? We're going through the same thing. The worst thing is issue 2.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing is issue 2 is because you got everybody in for issue 1, but who's coming back for issue 2 now? Before we go on, I want you to hold that thought for just a second. I want to let people know what we got going on because we're here to sell books. That's what Virtual Signings with Onrie is about. So we got, I think, 5 sets of books right here of Monster Matador number 1 and 2, signed by the man himself, right there.
Stephen Prince.
There.
Forgot my name.
Okay, we got him right here, and Mr. Prince, please price these out for me.
We want $10 a pop.
You let me know. So 10 for the 2. 10 for the 2.
What do you want to do? 10 for the 2? You want to do 10 for the 2?
You're the boss. What do you sell them for? You're the boss.
10 for the 2.
10 for the 2. Bang, 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 bang. If I had my DJ siren working, I would be banging on it right now. But I left my AAA batteries at home.
It's an Onrie special.
It's an Onrie special. We got the Prince in the house. Prince is here, everybody. Prince, he's back. And he's now a comic book creator. And he's much more handsome, too. All right. We got Monster Matador number 1 and 2 going for just $10 right now. Call it as you see it. You know what's up. Mr. Prince, please continue. I'm so sorry for interrupting you.
I don't remember what I was going to say.
Nice. Sometimes it happens.
Oh, no, I was going to say because we kickstarted it, and one of the things that after I did the first Kickstarter, I know you run them. They take everything out of you, and the thought, and this is a book I want to continue. And we did these 3 issues. We have the next book is it's almost complete.
Now?
What's that?
Hey, you guys are almost done with it, right? Like you guys.
Yeah, Fabio's got like 5 pages left. We're going to put it out in the fall. And the thought of doing, if you're doing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 issues of a story on Kickstarter, you're looking at by the time you have the whole story done, you're looking at 2-3 years. You know what I mean?
Dude, so it's 10 years. It's 10 years.
10 years. For some people, it is 10 years. So to me, we did these 3 books. We did our first one last June, and we just finished our last one at the beginning of May. So we did the 3 books in 1 year, the 3 issues in 1 year, and that 3rd issue is at the printer. So we'll come back. We can come back on the show for that one.
We'll definitely have you back. And we already sold the set of 1 and 2 to David Moore. $10 for the 2 issues, Mr. Pino. $10, you get both books. And this is an incredible series. I really love, and I love what Stephen has done here. And I love the presentation. I love everything about this. I've been waiting a long time to have you on here, by the way.
I was going to tell you I'm going to be in your hood next year, so we'll have to meet up. Thank you, Chuck.
calling a set 2. You are getting, and you have sold 2 sets already. How's that feel?
That's great. I should keep you around.
You should. But you know what? There's enough Onrie to go around for everybody.
I got to tell you, these are actually, they're going quick. I've been doing signings now because everything's opened up, and I've been selling a lot more than I thought I would.
Well, good. So, that's what's supposed to happen. And you know what?
What's supposed to happen. Yeah.
Let me tell you something else as well, Stephen. A lot of people aren't paying attention to this today because this is how it always goes, right? So what do creator-owned comics have over Marvel and DC? The fact that Marvel and DC has been a chain that has been around for a long time. And right now we're seeing like the success of all that kind of like reach new heights with all these licensing opportunities that have basically exploded, both for Marvel and DC. You know, they're both successful in their own arenas. And the thing is that no one ever takes into account a couple things about creator-owned comics. One, they have much, much thinner circulations than Marvel and DC. We're not distributed internationally, and we don't print up as many books. No matter how good you are in the creator-owned field, unless you got that distribution in place, you're just not going to be able to get out, which from a publisher standpoint can feel like a limitation, but it's actually an advantage from a different point of view. So for those of you collectors out there, where you want to put your money, you want to put your money in creator-owned comics. Because you know what? Tomorrow, Stephen, where do you live?
L.A.
L.A. What happens in L.A.? A whole bunch of Nikes. But one day, he's going to meet somebody who's a huge fan of his comic and who has the ability to make it into a movie where comes up with some kind of cool, idea that, is going to make for a great licensing opportunity. And suddenly these books are going to go up in value for 2 reasons. One, because there's a scarcity. And by that point, everybody who buys these books, some of you guys are going to store them. Some of you guys are going to, this just happens with everybody. I've seen this happen even with my books. They circulate. Comics are meant to circulate. And some of them get destroyed in circulation, and some of them get preserved. Very few get preserved. And over time, the scarcity index goes up. That's what drives the prices of collectibles up. And when you're investing in creator-owned books, you're getting these books at the ground level, because another thing that can happen too is Stephen could get approached by a big publisher. They could pick up his books, and now all of a sudden these printings right here are even more valuable because it was hot before it got picked up. So now it's growing in value because of that too. So,
yeah. And we're starting to look at those things too. So we'll see what happens.
You got some variants too, and you've worked with some people that I'm a big huge fan of. I really love Christy Shin. She did a variant for you, huh?
She did a pinup. In the first issue. She got a pinup, yeah. Christy's a lot of fun. Puis Calzada did a variant. He is the new artist on Cult of Dracula from Source Point Press. Tony Donnelly did a variant, who did Albert Einstein Time Mason over at Action Lab. We have a great artist whose name is Carlos Diarmas, a South American artist. He did a variant for issue number 3 that's amazing. I've got the original art somewhere. Should go pull it out.
So how do you feel? Like, how do you feel now that you got, you're almost done with this?
I feel great that it's done, and it's part of it is where we're knee deep in the next one. So it's like I haven't even had a chance to enjoy it. I've got the script written for the one after that. So it's, but it's cool. It's really just kind of like, not just having a comic, but having a comic that looks like this. This is one of our variants. Having an artist like Fabio draw it, it's really cool. It really feels accomplished. But one of the things, like you said about indie comic creators, I know a lot of us, like for me, a lot of people I know, like the problem, like our goals aren't necessarily like to work at Marvel or DC. You know, I don't have any aspirations to like
to
write
be told
Spider-Man.
how to manage your project, what you can and can't do. I mean, that takes a certain
Right.
a mindset, you know.
Yeah, and even with something like this, it's kind of like you have the freedom. You have the freedom to do the book that you want. You know, and I mean, I have a background in writing. I have a background in toy development. I used to develop properties for animation. I'm a copywriter. You know, a lot of us have writing backgrounds where, you know, we're actually like writers.
Yeah, no,
You know, so that's like, what I mean is like, you know, independent comics tend to get a bad rep sometimes. But I think what you're finding now with a lot of indie books, a lot of Kickstarter books, it's just, we're doing books that don't really have an outlet with traditional publishers. You know,
but when you really think about it, though, this bad rep, which I totally know, I totally hear what you're saying, and I used to feel this way too, especially when I first started out in comics. I was like, I don't want to be shoehorned into independent comics. I really didn't want to be there. I wanted to see. I'll still say it. And you know what? If you're an independent creator and you're listening to this, this is what you should be thinking too. You want your book to be mainstream. And you know what? It's not impossible, because look at the success that's come out of independent comics, starting with Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or you know, James O'Barr's The Crow, or you know, Brian Pulido's Lady Death. I mean, all this stuff started as creator-owned comics that took off. It was just the right title. So I've kind of come to embrace the idea of creator-owned comics as being the platform where you can do whatever it is that you want to do, and you will find your audience, because once you put yourself out there as a creator, it doesn't matter if your comic is the greatest thing or the worst thing, you will find an audience, because someone out there will connect with that work and will want to see it, you know, see more, you know.
And a lot of these books now are getting picked up by publishers, you know.
But there's also you mentioned that, and I'm sorry, I'll shut up after this. Getting picked up by a publisher, not always all it's cracked up to be.
No, it's not. Which is why I do not have a publisher right now.
And you may not need it. You know, that's the thing that I'm constantly going over as well. Like, if I've been to I want to say over 100 conventions, hawking my stuff, working my butt off every single convention, slinging my comics, I'm not giving a publisher 50%.
Right.
After all the money
you're still going to have to do the same amount of work to push those copies, because your publisher's not going to do it.
Exactly. You got to make the phone calls and everything. But another way to look at it too is this: if you license it to another publisher, then it becomes the publisher's job to promote it and to do everything, and that's okay. So if I were to ever work with the publisher, it'd be a licensing deal. I would still own the IP, but you know, I would let them print and distribute it. You know, that's perfectly okay.
That's the way. I mean, that's really, you know, the challenge, the problem I have with a lot of publishers is that, you know, one thing a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of publishers today aren't necessarily giving you money for the art, for the writing, for the coloring. They expect you to have the book done already, and then they're just going to publish it. So there's really no investment on the publisher part, and it really is a license. It should be a licensing deal, because you're the one who's funding everything. You're the one who's creating it. You know, they're slapping their logo and publishing it, which there's value to it, but it's a license, you know.
They have to know that if they pick up, and I get it from their standpoint too, because
absolutely.
If you're picking up if they're going to pick up your book and publish and distribute it, they got to know how many copies in mind that they can sell. The only way they can find that out is if they have a title that's somewhat similar to it that is received well. Then they analyze it and they think to themselves, why is it received well? I'm going to be very candid, and I'll tell you a story. Back in 2013, I had a conversation with Mike Richardson. He reached out to me and he showed interest in publishing Yi Sun Shin. And when we had our meeting, he expressed a lot of doubt in whether or not it would do well for Dark Horse, because he had made a 47 Ronin book with Stan Sakai, and it didn't do as well as he had hoped. It was something he was very passionate about. He did a lot of research on it. He had Stan Sakai draw the book. I mean, what more could you ask for? And at the time, I would say I was a bit more naive. And I said to Mr. Richardson, I said, 300 was successful. And he goes, yeah, but you're not Frank Miller. And that, at the time I was like, well, you son of a, but looking back on it, that's true, right? So publishers, they got to look at it as though they can make a quick buck off your IP. So that way you're making money and they're making money. And when I look back on this story now, I don't regret the fact that Dark Horse decided to pass over, because I don't think it would have worked. But if Mike Richardson reaches out to me tomorrow and says, you know what, I want to give it another go. You've reached a certain level, or something's changed. Someone blew a stink biscuit, and now all of a sudden the aroma has changed and there's opportunity to be had. That changes the atmosphere. And so doors are never closed, so to speak. It's a revolving door.
Right.
That's publishing.
No, absolutely.
And once the stuff's out there, you as the license holder get to decide how much and when it gets go out there. Like, that's power. Diamond doesn't have that kind of power.
Yeah.
No distribution has that kind of power.
Right.
Including publishers too, as a matter of fact. So what's next on the agenda for you? So you're finishing up the book right now. When do you expect to have it out?
We're gonna do probably in the fall, November, December. We'll do it. It's Monster Matador. It's my homage to Predator. It's Predator meets zombies meets Monster Matador. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
So is this your 64-page?
Yeah, it's called Afripocalypse.
Wow.
So he travels to South Africa. What's nice about doing a post-apocalyptic comic is that you actually get to travel around the world. Generally when you're in a movie of Mad Max, you're stuck in like the desert. You only kind of maybe see, if you're lucky, hints of what's going out beyond, Australia or that little patch of desert. So with Monster Matador, the fun part is we actually get to explore like what's actually happening to the world through him as he goes and fights monsters, wherever they arise in this post-apocalyptic world.
Now, one of the relationships in the story that I find to be very sentimental and really, I think, draws us in more, it's not just about this guy fighting a kaiju. It's really about a father trying to build a better world for his daughter.
Yeah.
And Chuck knows all about this. We're actually working on a project together right now where we're channeling our own experiences in order to basically tell the best story that we can, write what you know. So right. Is there some of you in this character? Is there something you can relate to between this relationship between?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially now that I have kids and I have a little daughter who's 3 years old, and the Matador is going to be circling back to Mexico to be with her, and it's definitely a lot of my own experiences, a lot of my own like fears and frustrations and things like that, feed into that story. How kind of like, you want to protect your children from things, but at the same time, they still have to kind of live in this world and have to be exposed to it at some point, and those kinds of like questions and, struggles and things like that. So, but yeah, it's always, it's the same thing, as a parent, you see the world as it is, and you just kind of like, you worry about like what it's going to be for them when they grow up, especially given the situation in the world today. I mean, having just been through COVID, things like that, you're just like, you look back and, you think about your own childhood and your own like the things you did, the freedoms you have. And like this past year, it was kind of like, well, are my kids ever going to be able to do that? Are they ever going to be able to live like a life like I did or whatever?
I think that's a very interesting point. And I think probably one of the things that have been running through my head, at least, is this whole idea of we're on the clock constantly.
Yeah.
And it really, the clock really, the clock's always been ticking. The clock is ticking the moment you're brought into this world, whether you choose to accept that or not. And most of the time, for most people, it's usually like the first 25 years of their lives, they don't hear the clock ticking. Now, as a 40-year-old, almost 40-year-old man, having lost someone really important to me as a result of COVID, I started hearing that clock ticking.
Right.
And you just never know what can happen tomorrow. And that's really put a lot of onus on me to really focus on my creative output more, to really start getting these projects out there. Because once I jumped into live sales, my priorities changed, especially at first. I mean, I had to acquire more inventory. I can't be pitching the same comics week in and week out. Everything's got to be different and new. And that's an investment of money. That's an investment of time. It's effort. And just preparing for some of these live shows takes hours, because you got to build out an entire collection of stuff that you're going to show off. And you got to mix in some new stuff with some old stuff. You got to be excited about it. The energy aspect of it is going on. And then you got all the other things going on in life. Being a creator, at least for me, requires kind of like silence and just real focus. Being able to really listen to what's going on inside your mind and allowing it all to play out as it can. And what I'm starting to realize is that I can't do that because it's just my life is not allowing me to do it. So I just kind of like drop those ideas down whenever I'm stationary for a minute. Like if I'm indisposed, I could be watching a stupid video on TikTok, or I could actually write down some ideas, and then when I have a free moment, transfer them over. But for you as a creator, how does it look like for you? Because I know you're not stationary either. You're doing a lot of different things.
I struggle with the same thing, because I need that quiet, but I also need to be able to sit and just kind of like, and I rarely have the time to do that anymore. Lately I've just been going through like bursts and then these long periods of just kind of like, I'll take notes and things like that, but I'll kind of like, I'm always thinking so that when I do sit down, when I do have like a half hour or something, I could just, get out as much as I can. But it's hard. It's been challenging, especially the past year, because my kids weren't in school. They were home all day. My wife, everyone was home, working from home, being home, and my kids are 3 and 5. So it's like there's not any quiet. You know what I mean? It's just constant. So it's been a challenge. I was lucky in the sense that I had actually, Tango of the Matadors was already written by the time the first Kickstarter hit. And we were already 2 issues into it being drawn. So we had a lot of lead time. And then the next book, which is being drawn right now, Afropocalypse, I had written about half of it around by the time COVID hit and everyone went into things shut down and everything. So even though this year has been kind of a wash, I was so ahead on stuff that I was able to kind of like, it makes it look like I've been getting a lot more done than I have, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It's interesting because I was at my first convention, my first like real out of state convention, a couple weeks ago in Pittsburgh, and we were at dinner. It was me, Ted Sikora, Kara Nicole, Sean McCardle, Chris Moran, and who else was there? Oh, and Chuck, not Chuck Pino, a different Chuck. And we were all sitting and having dinner together, and we were all talking about how did we survive COVID? What did we do? How do we move forward? And it was interesting because, for me at least, what it was initially, all right, I can't do conventions, might as well go on freelance, right? And I really didn't like freelancing. It was just not my thing. I didn't like seeing that a project was going in a direction that I didn't agree with, and that the person I was trying to help make it better was not listening to me, and deciding to go their direction, and my name gets put on it no matter what. And I finished my projects. I never left anything hanging, but I just realized it was not for me, and it took time, and sometimes that's how it is in comics. But the one thing that you had mentioned that really kind of like stuck with me was this whole idea of, time, and you not having the ability to be quiet, to have quiet around you always. And once you get to these moments when you can actually get it down, those ideas, that makes that time very valuable and precious. And it also prolongs the time it takes to actually get the product on, which makes it that much more valuable when you get this book. And hey, we got 2 issues going for just $10 right now. Call it as you see it. Issues 1 and 2 of Monster Matador. This is a love project. This is something you're gonna dig. For only $10, we only got 3 sets left. 3 more people come on here. They call it as you see it, and these are sold out. You're gonna have to buy it directly from the source. The source is right over there. Getting better at the pointing thing. But okay, so next question. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So what would you like to see done with this in terms of like intellectual property, like licensing? Like, are you seeing this as a video game, as a movie, like both?
I honestly like I said, I used to be in the toy business, and I kind of, when I used to be in advertising too, but I know how to make a product, I guess, you know what I mean? And I think for Monster Matador, I can see it in video games. I can see it in TV. I can see it as a movie. I can see it as animation. It's like the concept itself. I don't know if basic is the right word, but it's basic in the sense that you don't have to explain it. You know what I mean? And that's sort of the strength of it. And I think anytime you have a property that you can explain in just a few words, or, you go Batman and you go, okay, that's a guy that's a bat, right? Like you just get it right away. And I think like with Monster Man,
I think, that's funny because you do get it with Batman, but do you get it with Man Bat? Because that's also.
That always confused me. Man Bat really makes no sense. But I think it's one of those, like, I think every once in a while as a creative person, you get lucky with something, and I think like Monster Matador is just, when I take it out, I now that things have opened up, I mentioned I've done signings and whatever. And it's funny because like, I barely even have to sell the book. People go, oh, Monster Matador, I get it. And, boom, so I think, it's a story that is relatable in a sense. It's really about a guy who's just, fighting to make a better world, which is what we're all kind of doing, right? We're all struggling in a crappy world, trying to figure out a way to make it better. And yet it seems futile sometimes because there are constantly monsters coming from every direction that are just trying to mess it up. Right.
That's a really deep observation there, because I agree with you. I was talking with a convention rep last week, and he had told me that we were talking about conventions coming back, and I was telling him how it was really how we were all going through this tough time when they considered our work to be non-essential.
Right.
But then you realize now that what we are is really peacekeepers, because when you look at, say, something like politics, which is so easily divisive, you got your left and right sides, you got your black versus whites, you got your reds versus blues, whatever you want to say it. People are competitive by nature, right? And it's very rare that something brings us together. Like, we use sports as a means of camaraderie among our local communities, but comics, they bring us all together. So when we're at conventions, that's the ultimate camaraderie there. When someone buys your book and they meet I swear to you, I'm telling you right now, I have seen people meet the loves of their lives in front of my booths at conventions. It has happened more than once. And it's crazy, they'll just meet and they won't even know it. And then later on, they'll come back and they'll be like holding hands. It's really weird, but stuff like that happens. And that just makes you realize too, that our work is doing more than just entertaining us. It's bringing people together. It's like, if you can, you may not agree on certain political, foreign and domestic policies, but you can both agree on Monster Matador being a great comic, and you can find out for just
$10. For $10.
Great buy for $10. Look at that.
I'm learning, I'm learning.
Yeah, that's good. That's how it should be. I think now that we switch sides and we're getting Kyle knows what's up. Now, finally, they're knocking back Onrie. Jeez. But here's another question for you. In terms of comics, because you've shopped with me before, and you're a very selective buyer, and you like you picked up Amazing Spider-Man 100 for me. I remember you were the one who picked that up. And you picked up a couple other things at one point. I don't remember what exactly.
A bunch of what if books.
Bunches of what ifs. Yes.
The 90s series, not the old one. The second series from the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah. So what were the comics that you were growing up on, and what kind of led you down to that path?
I actually, growing up, like as a kid, I never had comics. My parents would always take them away. I went to an Orthodox yeshiva, and they told my parents, because I used to at the playground, they used to pretend I was Superman or whatever, and they said, comics are not good for him. Don't let him read comics, So I would always make my own. It was weird. But I would always see pictures of like X-Men or whatever. I was always so interested. And it wasn't until I was like, I think probably like 11 or 12. I remember getting my friend of mine had his bar mitzvah. I was 11. No, I was 12.
I had no idea you were part of the tribe.
Oh yeah. No,
I actually from the title of your book, I actually thought you were of like more of like a Hispanic background or Latin background. I didn't know you were.
My family is like one side is like, I think, Spanish going back like hundreds of years. But
that's crazy, because I got an aunt from Argentina, and she's technically Jewish. I mean, like, her grandfather came, and he decided to drop those roots. It was a pretty crazy time. Well, that's cool. So, all right, keep going. I'm sorry.
But I'm reminiscing now, because I remember he had a case of Coors in his bedroom, and we were just drunk. And he was 13, and he was getting rid of his comics. And I got a whole. I remember I got this Daredevil. It was like Daredevil number 248 or 249. It was this really cool cover with Daredevil fighting Wolverine.
Yes, I pitched that book recently.
Yeah, and then I just the first time I went to an actual comic shop, my haul was Punisher War Journal, where Wolverine fights the Punisher. It was the X-Men where Wolverine is on the cross, on the X cross,
Yeah,
like all these classic books. I think it was like McFarlane's like last Spider-Man issue. I mean, so like
that's where he punches Hulk in the nards.
Yeah, I mean, but can you imagine the first time you walk into a comic store and that's what you walk home with,
And then
So
you think
at
to
that,
yourself, why did I not take better care of those comics?
yeah, right.
I
No shit.
never
But that
thought.
was, yeah. But that like, so I mean, I don't really even read Marvel stuff or any too much of that stuff right now. But I always go back to that stuff probably because I grew up with it. But also a lot of it was a lot of the stuff like I'll read like anything from the 80s because I feel like I missed out that whole decade. you know? So I'll just read the weird. There's a cool book. I don't know if you've read it. You might like it. It's called Nth Man, the Ultimate Ninja.
Yes, I know the
And
series. There was a.
by
I got a story about that
uh,
series.
it's it's Larry Hama. It's actually really good.
What's
It's
it?
a
What's it about? Give me the pitch.
so it's basically Nth Man is he was raised in an orphanage with this other guy Alfie who could kind of like manipulate and bend time. And Nth Man is like he's basically been raised and trained to be like the ultimate ninja. And then it just kind of goes from there. It's a really cool. It's not what you expect it to be. It's kind of I don't even know how to explain it, but it's surprisingly like good. And it was supposed to run for 24 issues, but they had to wrap it up at 18. But it still wraps up nice. Like it's not like one of those things where you're left hanging. It's a complete story. So,
Interesting. We used to make jokes about this book. So I was at Comic-Con in San Diego, and I set up every year with another dealer. Southern California Comics is Jamie Newbold. Comes up to me and he goes, "Why don't you offer some people free comics in exchange for telling them about your book?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't have any free comics." And he was like, "Here, take some of these." And it was nothing but the ultimate
I'll
Nth
take
Man.
them. I'll take them.
Yeah, right. So I tried. It was weird for me. So I was like, "Hey, you want a free comic?" And I'll tell you about my comic, which isn't free. And people were just walking by, and he's like, "You're doing it wrong. You just." And I was like, "Look, I don't know. I was like, Jamie, you want these books back?" He's like, "No, just throw them in the garbage." I'm like, "Throw them in the garbage." He's like, "They're not going to be in the garbage. Just put it on top of the container over there, and I guarantee you that by the time you walk back here, those comics will be gone." So sure enough, I put this big set of comics on top of the garbage because there was one of those lids over there. I turn my back, start walking back. I turn around, they're gone. That was it. It was crazy because people are always going to pick up comics.
Yeah, that's true. But it's books like that. Marvel and I think DC too would put out books like that, and they would never sell. They're like all in like 10-cent bins or like landfills now because people, there just wasn't a market for it back then, which is what's great about now is that those types of comics now, like those are comics, you know what I mean? Like indie comics are comics now. And they've taken over, which is awesome. It's not just the Marvel DC world anymore. So,
and it's interesting because it never was a Marvel or a DC world. There was a time in comics when there was Charlatan Press, and they were huge. And there was a time in publishing when Marvel and DC were on the verge of extinction. Like nothing is ever the only permanent thing that we can be assured of is that there is impermanence throughout history, and it's destiny. Like this, the allure of Marvel stuff right now eventually is going to wear off and go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And eventually it's going to go somewhere else too. I can only imagine. Yeah, it's the only natural course. Gamal Hennessy, who worked as an attorney, I think he was an IP attorney for Marvel, mm-hmm. and he put together this book that he kickstarted last year called "The Business of Small Press Publishing."
Is that the Pocket Lawyer guy? Or
yes.
No? Yeah. Okay, I bought that. Yeah, I got to read.
Yeah, you got it right.
Yeah.
And he said it himself. He's like, where are people going next? They're going to small press publishing. They're going to creator owned. That's where they're going to go eventually. Why? Because we're the rights holders. You put our name on the actual product and you got something there. It's just a matter of time.
Here's the other thing I'll tell you, because you mentioned about, we talked a little bit about going with a publisher. I used to work, like I said, on in toys, and I was on the business side. I did creative stuff, but I was on the business side. And the one thing you learn very quickly is that, a lot of these companies, the companies that'll publish you, they'll handle all the entertainment stuff. And what that means is that there's the studio, there's the publishers people who are negotiating for you, there's the publisher, and then there's you, right? And who are the studio people going to talk to?
They're gonna, yeah.
The publishers people. Who has the power to make decisions? The publishers people, right? So you get left out of all that. They'll give you a credit. They'll say, "Oh, thank you, we love you," blah blah blah. But when one of the sad things and things that always breaks my heart about is when you see creators and they're like, they created the book or they did it and their characters are up on the screen or whatever, and then they're giving an interview and they go, "Oh, that must be great, your character, your book, and whatever," and they're just like, "Yeah, no one ever called me, I didn't even get a ticket to the premiere. I got to thank you. No one sent me a check for anything." You know what I mean? And you're just like, but wait a minute, you did it. Like you but it's like, no, you didn't, because there's these layers between you. And the thing with business is that unless you're the one signing the papers, unless you're the ones making decisions, who have the power to say yes or no, no one cares about you. And
that's true. And you know what? Another fact is too, and this is something that, happened with creators like Bill Finger, Jerry Siegel, and Joe Shuster. They were in the business of output.
Right.
They created characters, and those characters got published. And whatever happened, no one knew that there was any. When Superman was created, no one could fathom what would happen as a result of that character being introduced into the world. Same thing goes for Batman, and I would say the same thing is true of even the Marvel. The Marvel Age of comics.
Yeah, no one knew. No one could foresee that back then.
No, Stan Lee was not. He was taking a big risk with Spider-Man, with Amazing Fantasy 15. He just found the right place, the right pocket to do it. He had a lot more experience by that point. But look at Bill Finger. He when you really hear his story, and there's a great documentary about Bill Finger out there.
Yeah, I just watched it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But you think to yourself, like, these days, no one would tolerate that. These days, people would stand up for themselves. That's because of the fact that things have changed so much. Not everybody answers to the publisher anymore. Once people figured out that they didn't need publishers anymore, things changed. The platform changes.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Look at Kirkman and Mark Miller realized that 20 years ago, and he because he doesn't do mainstream stuff anymore, and he didn't he sell his Millar World to sold it to Netflix for something like 25 million or whatever.
Yep. And now Netflix is like,
oops.
No, I don't think they're. I know.
No, there's so
much different stuff out there. Just because one thing because one thing was a flop doesn't mean like, oh, okay, none of this stuff. That's a really kind of like simplistic way of thinking of it. Regard. But between us guys, like, yeah, it's pretty funny. I can see that. I was not a fan of Jupiter's Legacy, but what got them on board was Kick-Ass. I mean, everybody loved Kick-Ass. So, and I was advertised on cabs and everything too. I mean, it was that they pushed the heck out of that.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a matter of time before we see, Mark Millar's other stuff get picked up and really everybody just goes nuts over it. We are coming to the last 2 minutes of the show, I believe. Kyle, you're going to let me know in a second where we're at with everything. But I figured now is as good a time as any to let everybody know once again that we got Monster Matador number 1 and 2 going for just $10 right now. You get the first 2 parts of the series. The third part will be out when?
It's at the printer right now. So
it's at the printer. You guys can stay in touch with Steven. Steven's going to take it away. He's going to tell you how you can stay in touch with him. If you guys want to call right now.
You can go to monstermatador.com. You can check me out on Facebook at Monster Matador, Instagram Monster Matador, Twitter Monster Matador, or I'm also the Stephen Prince on Twitter. Email me, the third contact at gmail.com. I'd give you my address, but
only send money to that address.
only send money.
Don't show up. Ready to ask questions or to get stuff.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
I've got a mailbox, but it's okay. I never go there.
Stephen, thank you so much for coming on the show. I sincerely appreciate it, and
thank you.
I think we're up now. So, folks, I will see you next week, unless I'm supposed to go until the top of the hour. I'm not sure. But either way, I guess I will see you guys next week. Well, I will see you guys next week. And in the meantime, I'm going to let you know that we will be back on the air this Monday on Kicking It. And this is going on the pile. So I'm going to be shooting this out. And we only got 3 sets left. And I'm really happy about that. So 3 sets left. I'll take it. And call it as you see it. We got Monster Matador number 1 and 2 going for just $10. Call it as you see it. And Mr. Prince, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Onrie.
Yep, absolutely. And let's see. So, how are you doing today? How are you doing?
How are you doing? That was good. That was fun.
I think Kyle left for a second, so he's going to come back.
All right.
Dude, what's going on? And I'll be like, hey, But we're on the XP. How's it feel?
What's that?
You got your face somewhere in the world right now. Someone has an 80-inch screen streaming what's happening on the XP, and they see you. How's that feel?
Feels good. It's like Boogie Nights. I'm somebody.
Boogie Nights, yeah. I would advise not standing up and pulling your pants
down.
No,
that's why I'm not standing up.
Yeah, you're sitting. That's good. You super glued yourself to the chair. Yeah. I used to be able to do that, but then I kept ruining my pants, and so that didn't work anymore. But all right, let's see here. All right, we're done. See you later. Bye, everyone.